Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here on a weekday, especially when everyone is working. For today's one of the most interesting sessions on dementia, where we're going to talk about new pharmacotherapy and the sexual disorders in dementia, which is, I think, a very interesting topic to talk about. I, Dr. Priyanka Mahajan, Secretary of Bombay Psychiatric Society, and the entire team of BPS would like to welcome you all for this event. For today's event, Dr. Jay Shastri will be our chairperson. To introduce Dr. Jay Shastri, I think most of us know him as one of the senior consultants. He has a lot of experience in child psychiatry. That's how I have known him for years, that everyone says child psychiatry is equal to Dr. Jay Shastri, everyone going there. He inherits, I think, the skills of it from his genetic lineage. Every one of us know that. Currently, he is working as a consultant psychiatrist in private setting at Dr. Shastri's clinic. He is attached to multiple other hospitals and has a great amount of research done. If I speak it as Dr. Mohandas was saying, I was muttering and trying to read everything. It's going to be the whole of the event. But he's an active researcher. To introduce him, he has almost 28 projects where he is a sub-investigator. He's into active research. He has a lot of publications to his name. He's presented papers. He's chaired multiple sessions, has held various academic positions in various organizations. He's been a part of BPS. Currently, he's the treasurer of BPS. He's been the treasurer of IPS or IABP also. So we welcome Jay sir. I think he doesn't need much of an introduction. Over to Jay sir for starting the session.
Thank you so much, Priyanka, and it's my proud pleasure to be chairing and moderating this particular session, especially when Dr. Mohandas sir and Avinash is speaking. I think that's a wonderful opportunity. Nobody would want to miss it. And as Avinash said, since I'm chairing, I'm going to be listening the entire session from the beginning till the end. So it's going to be a real great pleasure. Today's topic is dementia update. September being dementia month, there are a lot of activities being conducted under this particular clinical entity. And BPS has come forward with this particular CME, wherein we have got two very interesting sessions. One is by Dr. E. Mohandas sir. He'll be talking about newer agents in the pharmacotherapeutic approach of dementia, 2021 and beyond. So he's going to give us a sneak peek into the futuristic dimensions of psychopharmacology in dementia. And the other one will be by Dr. Avinash D'Souza. He'll be talking about sexual issues in dementia. To introduce Dr. Mohandas sir, I think, again, nobody needs his introduction. He is the one whom I think everybody must have heard at some point in time. If you are a psychiatrist from India or from abroad, you must have heard him at some point in time. And most of his lectures are on psychopharmacology, on biological psychiatry, and that's where his interests are. I think he was the first Indian to chair the WPS section for developing countries and the South Asian Forum International, which covers almost 18 countries. He's also the first Indian to coordinate Indo-Sri Lankan, Indo-Malaysian, Indo-Bangladesh, and Indo-Pakistan CMEs and training programs, in addition to being the first Indian Director of Education and Training for Medical Bioethics and Bioethics for the UNESCO Asia Pacific Bioethics Network. So, sir has a rich academic plus social skills. He's currently practicing at Elite Mission Hospital for last 28 years and also associated currently with Sun Medical Center. I think to summarize sir's introduction, I can say that he's the big D of psychopharmacology. And I think we are really in for a great feat when he's going to give us a sneak peek into the newer agents in the psychopharmacological dimension dementia. Sir, over to you for your deliberation.
Yeah, I'm just sharing the slides, sharing the screen. Can you see the slides? Can you see the slides?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. We can see very, very clearly, sir. Please.
Yeah, thank you very much, moderator Jai Shastri. His father was very close to me. I had been to his house also. I know Jai when he was a student. Also, Avinash's father also I used to know. But I am still young. Okay. Only 4 decades plus in psychiatry. Now I am supposed to talk on pharmacotherapy on Alzheimer's disease, current trends and future prospects. Maybe 2020, 21, or what is going to happen in the future. My first greetings and gratitude to Jeffrey Lee Cummings. He is one of the authorities in the world on dementia. And I had the chance to even write a paper as a co-author along with him. These are the projected number of people aged 65 and old in US population, 2010 to 2050. These are the projections. So it's going to be very high. People will go longer. Life expectancy is more, so the number also will be more. Out of the total 5.8 billion, if you see this yellow box, meaning 65 to 74 years, around 1 million, that is 17%. But this color, violet color, 75 to 84 years, that you have to expect around 47% increase. And 84, 85 plus years, many people might live around 36%. If you are interested, you can go through the journal Alzheimer's Dementia 2020. Alzheimer's dementia, as you know pretty well, it is multifactorial etiopathogenesis. Nobody knows how it is produced, but we know the pathological characteristic as extracellular toxic amyloid accumulation and also the tau hyperphosphorylation. And maybe because of many genetics, epigenetic factors really account for this thing, oxidative stress, hormonal metabolic factors, neuroinflammation, neurovascular hypothesis, metallotoxicity hypothesis, etc., which produces a synaptic failure, basically a presynaptic cholinergic deficit. That is why we give cholinesterase inhibitors. Also, excitotoxicity. That is why we give NMDA antagonist like memantine. Now, if you see the evolution of drug development, what we have is acetylcholinesterase inhibitors and NMDA antagonists. Medical foods, questionable. And others, we do not have enough evidence. Chelators, antioxidant, anti-inflammatory agents, tau modifiers, mitochondria targets, fish oil, amyloid modifiers and vaccine, cholesterol lowering drugs, hormone therapies, beta and gamma secretase modifiers, they are all experimental treatments. So the targets are beta and gamma secretase inhibitors, but unfortunately, nothing has come out fruitfully. Anti-tau agents, unfortunately, we do not have any medicines. But we do have cholinesterase inhibitors. That is the bread and butter that we do it. But it doesn't really give much benefit, but only a minimal benefit, which I will come to that. We have got the NMDA antagonist memantine that may be given. It may help some people, but some people give combination of memantine and cholinesterase inhibitors, also antioxidants. What is available currently? We do have donepezil, For mild to moderate and even moderate to severe disease, the dosage is high. Rivastigmine, galantamine, and memantine and donepezil memantine combination. You can go through if you want. This is from Practical Neurology 2019. What about donepezil? It has got a long history. 1996 US FDA approval. 97 launched in the US for the treatment of mild to moderate Alzheimer's. Later, in severe cases also, you can use it. 2001, donepezil hydrochloride fine granule formulation in Japan. Also, oral disintegration tablet, that is all in Japan. Oral jelly formulation and sustained release high dose, 23 milligram formulation in 2010. US National Drug Agency, donepezil once weekly transdermal formulation in collaboration with Takeko Sayaku was submitted in June 2010, but nothing worthwhile has come out. A dry syrup formulation, a dry syrup in water in the pre-registration in Japan. Fast dissolving oral film strip formulation, collaboration with Applied Pharma Research and Labatec also is in clinical evaluation. Transdermal patch with Labatec, donepezil hydrochloride, but still it's experimental. It is also preclinical evaluation. But what about donepezil? 2017 meta-analysis has suggested it can be more efficacious than galantamine or rivastigmine in improving global Alzheimer's disease symptomatology. But what you have to do is slow titration, starting with smaller dosage, 2.5 milligram, titrating to 5 milligram over 6 weeks. And those people who have got sensitivity to cholinergic side effects. After 4 to 6 weeks, you can titrate up. Then you can give 10 milligram formulation, and after 3 months, maybe you can try if the client tolerates 23 milligram dosage. However, we usually give 5 to 10 milligram. This is from Expert Opinion Drug Safety 2020. What about rivastigmine? Both oral and transdermal patch, you know very well. It's a dual inhibitor of acetyl and butyrylcholinesterase, selective for the G1 isoform of acetylcholinesterase without hepatic metabolism by the cytochrome P450 system. Oral form approved for the treatment of mild to moderate Alzheimer's is associated with severe gastrointestinal side effects. Transdermal patch formulation can be used better for the better tolerability. It has been approved in European Union, US in 2000, but Japan only in 2010. I think hello, some crosstalk is happening. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. You please continue. I'll look into the crosstalk.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, sir. Yeah. We can hear you very clearly.
Rivastigmine transdermal patch in the European Union in 2007, but Japan really went for donepezil initially, so it was late. And you have got 4.5 hours once daily, 9.5 milligram in a day, or once daily, but that is once daily, or 13 milligram around 24 hours. And 1 day patch formulation of with the Bio D3 transdermal drug delivery, it is in preclinical evaluation. Galantamine is also available in India, 2001 in Europe, March 2011 in Japan, and they are also trying for a 1 day patch formulation, but preclinical evaluation. Memogain has more than 15 times higher bioavailability in the brain than the same dose of galantamine It was in the phase 5 trial since November 2011, but it has been taken out. Huperzine, only in China, 1995, once weekly sustained release transdermal patch formulation since 2008, sustained release topical gel formulation in preclinical evaluation. What about the effects, efficacy? Mean global improvement over placebo is 3 to 4 points on the ADSCOG. That is very minimal. Improvement roughly equivalent to naturalistic decline expected over a 6-month period. But still something is better than nothing. But most studies were short-term, 6 months, though 1 and 3 year studies have been reported with the donepezil, which suggest benefits of cholinesterase inhibitors continue in the long term. Retrospective analysis and some long-term open studies suggest cholinesterase inhibitors, especially donepezil, may be helpful in disease modification, but we need more data. The trials show very small number needed to treat, between 3 and 7 in most cases, with appropriate dose of cholinesterase inhibitors in order to postpone or reverse deterioration in one of them. Even with larger dose of cholinesterase inhibitors, NNTs are small. But in conjunction with the good safety and tolerability of newer cholinesterase inhibitors, even small NNTs suggest they have some valuable place, but though minimal, and that is why we are still sticking to that. Memantine improves cognition, functional ability, and behavioral symptom moderate to severe Alzheimer's, but doesn't modify the disease. Well tolerated in clinical trials, and optimal duration of treatment with memantine has not been determined. But you can discontinue if there is no evidence of any therapeutic benefit after 6 months or even later. Some people in UK, there was a suggestion, why don't you combine memantine and vitamin D? There were some reports that might improve, but further data is not available. After 2012, not many articles have come after that. Anti-tau agents inhibit tau hyperphosphorylation, inhibit tau misfolding aggregation, and increases tau clearance, etc. But no good drug has come out till today. What about the new drug development? You are searching. This is from Jeffrey Cummings, 2020. It published online in July 2020. These are the drugs, disease-modifying drugs. You have got a symptom reducing small molecules, meaning 121 agents in clinical trials for treatment of Alzheimer's disease. 29 agents are in 36 phase 3 trials. 65 agents are in 73 phase 2 trials, and 27 agents are in 27 phase 1 trials. Agents in trial for cognitive enhancement, only 12 drugs are there. BPSD or NPSD, I want to call it NPSD, neuropsychiatric symptoms of dementia, 12. Disease modifying treatments, 97. These are the mechanisms of action of agent in phase 3 of Alzheimer's drug development pipeline. Neuropsychiatric symptoms, symptomatic cognitive enhancers, and disease modifying therapies mainly. That's called DMTs. And metabolism, bioenergetics, tau, only 1 study. Inflammation, infection, immunity, only 3 studies. Vascular, only 1 study. Synaptic plasticity and neuroprotection, 4. Amyloid, 6, especially monoclonal antibodies, vaccine, only 1. attempts to develop disease-modifying therapies for Alzheimer's have a 100% failure rate. So we can search for again, but we do not know what will be the fate of these drugs. These are some of the agents in phase 2 trials. I will not go into details. So what are the newer agents? People are searching for that. New cholinesterase enzyme inhibitors and hybrids, new NMDA receptor antagonists or synaptic function modifiers, 5-HT6 receptor antagonists, gut microbiota regulators, autophagic modifiers, anti-inflammatory drugs, circadian rhythm stabilizers, immunotherapy, phosphodiesterase enzyme inhibitors, diets, epigenetic targets, and some TREM2 signaling. I will not talk about it. The cholinesterase inhibitors, that is, one is called fencerin. It is pure non-competitive. It is a selective cholinesterase enzyme inhibitor. It penetrates the brain. Brain plasma concentration is 10:1. But tolcerin has got a 200-fold selectivity. Brain-blood ratio is 24:1. There is another huperzin analog, which is still being tried. That also is a new one. I think you can go through. This journal is available free, Biomolecules. You can go through it, and Acta Pharmacologia Sinica, both are 2020 lead. Nitidine and avicin derived from Xanthoxylum rigidum, cholinesterase and MAO-A inhibition and anti-beta amyloid aggregation. Helminthosporin derived from Rumex abyssiniac jack. These are herbal preparation with cholinesterase inhibitory action. Methane-sulfonyl fluoride and bambuterol derivative. Now these are the hybrids. Heterodimers of tacrin and donepezil, combination of acridine or tacrin with the donepezil fragment, heterodimers of tacrin and huperzin or huperin, heterodimers of tacrin and bifendate, and heterodimers of analog of tacrin and lipoic acid, lipocrine, heterodimers of tacrin and prolox, tacrin and epsilon. These are some of the combination people are trying with a vasodilating beta blocker, carbazole. This is from Molecular Neurobiology 2021. You can go through the article by Shahab Uddin and others. Heterodimers of and ferulic acid. I mean, these are a combination. 8-hydroxyquinoline, donepezil, but most important, another one is partial serotonin subtype 4 receptor agonist. That is called a heterodimer called donacopride. Then rivastigmine and rasagiline, ladostigil. Heterodimers of galantamine and memantine. These funny combination people are trying, and also melatonin. NMDA receptor antagonists. These are all trial. I have told you phase 2 to phase 3 trials. It may come out, it may not come out. This is the number they have given. NMDA receptor block, tau phosphorylation inhibition, and these are some of the drugs which might come, but which may disappear also. Ringofilin derived from Uncaria ringofila being tried, but we don't know the fate. Now, synaptic plasticity and neuroprotection modifiers, low dose levetiracetam. People are now under trial, sp2A modulator, blarcamesine, sigma-1 receptor agonist and M2 autoreceptor antagonist, not riluzole, but troriluzole, glutamate modulator, icosapent ethyl, purified form of omega-3 fatty acids, And non-peptide ligand of the P75 neurotrophin receptor, don't worry about it. And we do have many sigma receptors activators in trials, but nothing has come out. We have to wait. Gut microbiota regulators, probiotic supplementation, it will not anyway harm you. It may help. There are many articles which have come on gut microbiota and dementia, Alzheimer's disease. Many reviews are there. Now, oligomenate, a putative Alzheimer's disease therapeutic derived from seaweed, developed from Shanghai Green Valley Pharmaceutical for the treatment of Alzheimer's disease and was approved by China's regulators for the treatment of mild to moderate Alzheimer's disease, November 2019. Another drug which is being tried is GV971. It can penetrate easily through the blood-brain barrier and bind to beta amyloid and inhibit beta amyloid fibril formation, the fibrillary type. Anti-inflammatory agents, cromolyn with ibuprofen, that's a mast cell stabilizer, and acylaragon, reduce amyloid transport into the brain, reduce inflammation. And you have got a bacteria protease inhibitor targeting gingipain, that is many people will have the dental inflammation, which can be a foreign for Alzheimer's. Some people talk about it. Masitinib, tyrosine kinase inhibitors, it modulates the mast cell related inflammatory processes. Nilotinamide, reduce inflammatory cytokines. And montelukast, everybody knows in pulmonology, leukotriene receptor antagonist. People are trying, but nothing has come out. Autophagic modifiers to promote the degradation of beta amyloid or tau, rapamycin. Methylene blue, it was an old drug. It has come out again, come back again. And quercetin modified nanoparticles. 5-HT6 receptor antagonist, it hasn't proven much. But one drug used as an adjunct to donepezil and memantine is now under investigation. Now, circadian rhythm stabilizers, suvorexan, orexin receptor antagonist that promotes sleep via selective antagonism of orexin receptors was reported to ameliorate cognitive impairment and Alzheimer's disease pathology in mouse model of Alzheimer's disease. Now, in phase 2 and 3 immunotherapy drug, aducanumab monoclonal antibody directed at plaques and oligomers. Recently, it was approved. It's a peculiar type of approval. I will tell about it. Amyloid vaccine, all these Solonabar, all these are being tried, but nothing has come out well. Aducanumab, humanized monoclonal antibody, and Verubestat, very difficult for me to even pronounce it, Verubestat, which reduced brain beta amyloid by 90% without changing the trajectory of the disease in Alzheimer's disease patient. Aducanumab, in late October 2019, the sponsor, this is a biological license application. It was filed early in 2004 regulatory approval for biological treatment of Alzheimer's. Sufficient exposure to high dose aducanumab reduced clinical decline across multiple clinical endpoints. However, initial EMERGE trial was negative, but later ENGAGE trial with higher dosage, it may have some benefit. That is why in June 7, 2021, it was granted accelerated approval, meaning effect on surrogate endpoint that is reasonably likely to predict a clinical benefit patient. Probable. It is a human immunoglobulin gamma 1 monoclonal antibody, crosses the blood-brain barrier, selectively targets aggregated soluble oligomers or insoluble fibrils, and amyloid PET scan or even lumbar puncture has to be done to be sure that the patient has got amyloid plaques. But it is beneficial in MCI or early Alzheimer's. But you can have side effects, amyloid-related imaging abnormalities called ARIA, hypersensitive reaction, include edema, headache, microhemorrhages, and falls. But unfortunately, currently, the cost is $56,000 per year. Who can afford in India? Now it has to be given an IV infusion every 4 weeks, with a minimum of 21 days in between. The infusion should be given over a 1 hour time frame. Aducanumab should be diluted with 100 ml of 0.9% sodium chloride injection before administration as an infusion. First infusion, 1 milligram per kilogram. Second infusion, again the same dose. Third infusion, you can increase. Fourth infusion, 3 milligram per kilogram. Seventh infusion onwards, 10 milligram per kilogram. But mind you, the cost really prohibits. Tau immunotherapies, plenty have come, but unfortunately, nothing has been suggested to be improved, to have a beneficial benefit. The reason being, there are phosphoepitopes of tau and conformational forms of tau, and they may be different in Alzheimer's disease population. Epigenetic targets, you know the telomere, this is a centromere, this is a telomeres. Telomere reverse transcriptase, abbreviated TERT or HTRT in humans, is a catalytic subunit of the enzyme telomerase, which together with the telomerase RNA component comprises the most important unit of telomerase complex. And they are part of distinct subgroup of RNA-dependent polymerases. And this peptide vaccine mimics the extra telomeric functions of this one to inhibit neurotoxicity, apoptosis, and the production of reactive oxygen species induced by beta amyloid. But it is being tried. Another epigenetic target is Ionis MAPT, antisense oligonucleotide targeting tau expression, microtubule associated protein, MAPT RNA inhibitor, but we have to still wait. Epigenetic other mRNA targets, vafidemstat, lysine-specific demethylase 1 inhibitor, and monoamine MAO-B inhibitor. MicroRNA targets are 298, 31, 146A. Many drugs have come, but nothing has proven effective. Phosphodiesterase inhibitors, there are, as you pretty well know, there are 11 groups of phosphodiesterase inhibitors. PDE5 inhibitor, you know, especially sildenafil and other things that you know. But does it have a use in dementia? It has got a role in cardiology. You know, PDE4 inhibitor prolongs CAMP activities and improves neuronal plasticity. Cilostazol PDE3 inhibitor improve cerebral circulation. So people are trying whether we can give a low dosage. Nanotechnology-based drug delivery system for Alzheimer's disease, whether you can give, it is called pharmacoanatomy and delivery. Depending upon the site, you can give liposomes, polymeric nanoparticles, dendrimers, etc. These are polymeric nanoparticles, even donepezil, intranasal you can give, galantamine, rivastigmine, people are trying solid lipid nanoparticles, but which are underway. What about neural stem cell therapy for neurovascular injury in Alzheimer's. While murine Alzheimer's disease has been successfully treated with stem cells, transgenic models translate very poorly and their effectiveness usually not reliable in human beings. Future preclinical research on stem cell therapy for Alzheimer's should place a special emphasis on safety, determining the best methods of sourcing and delivery of cells, and assessing proper stem cell function in degenerative microenvironment of Alzheimer's afflicted in CNS. Harnessing with NSCs, that is neural stem cells, and vascular progenitor cells together to restore damaged cerebral vessels and recover compromised neurons may be more effective strategy, but we have to wait still. You can go through this article in Experimental Neurology, which has come recently. Mediterranean diet, ketogenic diet, medical foods, many medical foods are there. The foods are Axoda, Sovenide, combination of omega-3 fatty acid, vitamin B6, 12, all this combination. And serifluin NAC in acetylcysteine, L-methylfolate, methylcobalamin, N-acetylcysteine combination. Recently, they have told that there's something called an epigenetic diet. All these things have been put: folic acid, choline, vitamin B12, selenium, zinc, omega-3 acid, polyphenols, etc. The most beneficial results of dietary approaches, including the use of medical foods, may be expected when applied early in pre-symptomatic stage of the disease. The clients come to you when they get some psychiatric problem or moderate problem. Most studies have been conducted in patients with mild Alzheimer's and cannot be generalized to other stages of Alzheimer's or mild cognitive impairment. Large clinical studies should have to be done. Now, other dietary factors: caffeine, no evidence from RCTs, coca and coca-derived products, need further studies. Curcumin, curcuminoids, no definite conclusion. Garlic, no RCTs. Magnesium supplement, no RCTs. Isoflavoin group of flavonoid needs further studies. Multi-domain intervention and omega-3, PUFA supplementation, etc. Some people say beneficial but need further studies. Resveratrol, phenolic compound from grapes and red wine, no sufficient evidence for prescribing this supplement. Tea, evidence controversial. Beta carotene still being tried. The question is, why did the treatment trials fail in Alzheimer's? Are we missing the target or spraying bullets without a direction? Probably yes. Are we dealing with the multiple subtypes of Alzheimer's? There are multiple subtypes which I am not talking now. Do the failed trials targeting abnormal beta amyloid or tau hyperphosphorylation reflect a doubtful etiological hypothesis? We have to rediscover it. Do APP mutation cause disease by altering the generation of beta amyloid? Does beta amyloid employ tau to damage neurons? Probably yes. But even without that also you can get it. Is soluble beta amyloid the toxic species? That's a fibrillary one. Is it because of the disconnect with the time early to treat or late? Disconnect with the quantity, how much you are giving the dosage, and disconnect with the anatomical location. Is it the reason? Probably yes. Is it because the drugs are given too late in the disease? Probably yes. I think two tailpieces: potential of coconut oil and medium chain triglycerides in the prevention and treatment of Alzheimer's disease. Coconut oil has unique fatty acid combination rich in medium chain fatty acid, and it reaches via the portal vein and through the lymphatic system. It is supposed to be beneficial. There are some articles coming. And virgin coconut oil and MCT oil, coconut, something from coconut are promising avenues that should be explored further for the management of brain glucose hypometabolism. This is from Mechanism of Aging and Development by Chatterjee. That Chatterjee is a female. Honey as a potential natural source of cholinesterase inhibitors Alzheimer's. This is from a Spanish trial. But whether we can give honey, we have to still wait. So we have to come to the conclusion that the plaques are not the cause of senile dementia, but only an accompanying feature of senile involution or the central nervous system, Alois Alzheimer's, and the first patient. So Alois Alzheimer has told, I am therefore not able to make any final conclusion about the circumscribed form of senile brain atrophy, but I wanted to communicate my observation because they show the difficulties which still lie in the way of interpretation of these results. Perhaps they will motivate someone else with new material to answer the question, still awaiting a solution even in 2021. This is by Alois Alzheimer's 1911. If we could unfold the future, the present would be our greatest care. I think the present would be our greatest care or even a scare. So we do not have much. We are still hunting for it. We don't know what we are dealing. We talk, we teach of Alzheimer's, the good old one. The drugs are being tried, but in our hand is only cholinesterase inhibitors and NMDA antagonists, which may help to some extent, but most important, moderate to severe patient. It is not the cure, it is the care that matters, especially the non-pharmacological methods, exercise, etc., religiosity, spirituality, or whatnot, good companion, and that is more important, good care, that really matters well. Thank you very much for the patient listening.
Thank you so much, sir, for giving such a wonderful presentation. And I think it did give us a lot of information regarding what's happening in the field of psychopharmacology when we talk about dementia. So thank you so much, sir. Our original plan is to take up questions for you, but if you are comfortable, Avinash has a very small presentation. I just saw his slide while uploading. It's only 9 slides. So if you wish, I think he should finish his presentation within another 10 to 15 minutes, and then we can combine the question answers, or you would like to finish. I'll allow you to take that call. Sir? Hello?
Avinash?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so would you like him to finish his presentation and then we'll take the questions? Is it okay with you?
Yeah, no problem. Let him go ahead.
Sure. So Avinash, I'll just share your presentation.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think like Dr. E. Mohandas, Dr. Avinash D'Souza also does not need any introduction. He's the current president of Bombay Psychiatric Society, extremely dynamic. We being the office bearers at times feel exhausted, but he does not. So he just keeps on coming up with events and activities, and we really proud that we are working with him, under him. And he's going to be talking about sexual issues in dementia. Again, one of the very important aspects will come up with a lot of caregivers coming with such issues, and they are extremely ashamed or even frustrated at this particular aspect of Alzheimer's or dementia presentation. And it's very important that we give them some hope, some way to handle this problem. So from that perspective, we request Avinash to take his presentation further.
Yeah. Jay, you will have to just, it's, I think, an animated presentation. So you'll have to just keep clicking. I'm just informing you, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Next slide. When we look at sexual issues in dementia, the reason I thought of doing this presentation was, one is, of course, I felt that drugs were a more pertinent topic. And secondly, I felt that what's important is that we talk about sexual issues because it's a common complaint clinically, and we really don't know medication wise what to do next. So the reason we're discussing sexual issues is because these are not sexual issues. It's not about the sexuality and sexual behavior of dementia patients. It's rather about sexual problems that we see in patients with dementia. And these are on a spectrum. They are on a spectrum from, smaller, very subtle problems, which are not worrisome, to problems which can be extremely worrisome and troublesome. And what I aim to sort of present today is a few cases that I have seen in my practice. And cases A where you need no intervention, to cases where you need a lot of intervention, to cases where you need behavioral interventions. So this is something which I want to present. And sexual symptoms are important because they are symptoms with which the patient comes to you. Very often the caregiver comes to you that, uska bhulna is not a problem. His forgetfulness is not a worry. His anger is not a worry. But these symptoms are very embarrassing for us, publicly. And these are very embarrassing for us in the home. And there are small children in the home. There are servants in the home. There are all sorts of things. So this is what becomes more a difficulty. So it adds to the misery of the caregiver, which is why we need to treat it. Next. So there are a variety of ways in which sexual symptoms could present in dementia. So we've seen patients with behavior which is, as I said, very subtle. You won't even call it sexual at times, to behavior which is extremely hypersexual. Next. So the first case is of an 80-year-old man who I saw, who I call the collector. And the reason I call the collector is because all he would do was, suddenly he developed dementia. Was diagnosed as dementia. He was on treatment. Behaviorally, there were no problems, but suddenly his relatives found that he would take a lot of interest in any photographs or any pictures which were slightly of a sexual nature. So what he would do is he would actually take a scissor, cut them, store them all in one envelope, and keep looking at them. And it would get a little embarrassing because he would sometimes spread it out on the dining table, and there are children in the house and there are adults in the house, and they really didn't know what to do. He would also sometimes go for a walk, go to the newspaper vendor and collect some pornographic magazines and bring it home. But he never engaged in any sexual behavior, meaning he wouldn't touch anyone inappropriately, or he would never engage in any masturbatory behavior. He would never try to make others see what he's seeing, never do anything that way. He would just do this and be very happy. I mean, even in the Times of India, if any photo came of somebody who was semi-clad, particularly a lady, he would cut it and keep it. And this was very interesting because he had lost memory. But this activity he was doing very diligently. So it was a very difficult thing to and the relatives were like, usko sab kuch yaad nahi rehta, but ye sab karne ko yaad rehta. So it was a very funny, embarrassing situation for them. And he would even buy a magazine just because the cover had something which was a little sexual on it, that way. So these kind of things. So we really didn't know what to do. So I mean, just as we would probably treat any other behavioral, and I remember we were often taught that sometimes if you give tricyclic antidepressants, the sexual urges reduce as a side effect. So so we give him a very low dose of amitriptyline, warning the relatives that urinary retention and constipation can be side effects. And with around 25 mg of amitriptyline, he did very well and the behavior stopped. So I thought I'll just share this with you. Next case. Next. Yeah, the next case is of a person who I saw who was again a 79-year-old man with dementia who used to speak about sexuality. So, suddenly he would he would be in a normal conversation with you, and in a normal conversation he would suddenly shoot off and speak about sexuality. So he would, ask you, how is your sexual life going on, or he would ask you, what do you like sexually. I mean, and this he would do with anyone, which would get very embarrassing. He would suddenly, probably ask his daughter-in-law, he would suddenly ask the neighbor, he would suddenly ask the watchman, and this would get a little embarrassing, because I mean, many of the caregiver staff would laugh it off, but it was a very embarrassing thing, because once they took him to a marriage, and there I mean, he ended up asking the groom, what you plan to do on your honeymoon, and all these kind of things, and it got very embarrassing for the entire family. But then of course they knew he has dementia and all that, so they said, again, here now, these are what we call the subtle behaviors. I mean, see, it's embarrassing, it's subtle. Again, there was no touching, no sexually inappropriate behavior anywhere, but just verbal sexual mentioning. So, if he would probably see TV, and there were instances where, he saw a news anchor and he would comment about the news anchor in a sexual manner. So again, this was very embarrassing. And they said, I mean, how can this be brain damage wise? And again, my first case, who I told you collected photographs, and the second case, these were people who were never hypersexual in their pre-morbid personalities. So when I spoke to the spouse, they said there was never any element of hypersexuality in them. So it was suddenly come up only post the dementia. So, but then of course they did have some temporal lobe atrophy, which was there. They did have frontal lobe atrophy, which was there. So probably it was a consequence of that, and some circuitry disruption. Again, here, I mean, what we did was, we had to, because of this excessive speaking, we put him on a low dose of risperidone, and he did very well. And the speaking about sexuality didn't reduce, but it definitely, frequency came down, intensity came down, and the relative said it's far more manageable. Next slide. Sorry, next. Just
a second, Avinash.
Yeah. No problem. So there was another case which I saw, which was of an 83-year-old male. And now I just want to place on record, a lot of you may think, how come all these cases come to me? So, I stay in Bandra, Santa Cruz, where we have a lot of Christian old people, who have dementia, and their children are all abroad. So, and I'm one of the few psychiatrists that makes home visits in the area. So that's why, I'm called upon by the church and many other people to look upon these people. So this was a case of, we had someone who was very well known in the area as an individual, and he had developed dementia over time. So he developed kissing behavior. He would kiss anyone who would come to him, man, woman, it didn't matter. I mean, he would like hold you tight and kiss you on the cheek. And this became very embarrassing, because he went once to church and he kissed around 10 ladies in the church, and it became very 10, and he kissed 10 men also. So it became very embarrassing, and they really didn't know. Now, I don't know whether, this was a hyper orality kind of a thing that developed because of temporal lobe damage, from a neuropsychiatric perspective. So because his MRI did show atrophy, of course, generalized atrophy as well as temporal lobe atrophy. So this was what I could sort of attribute the behavior to. And again, here there was no other behavior. These are cases where this one single symptom, was a symptom which was distressing. There was no behavior of touching anyone. I mean, they would say, hello, uncle, how are you? Imagine he'll suddenly kiss you on the cheek. It would get a little embarrassing. Similarly, and the thing is, the people understood he's also kissing the men. It's not that there's something, wrong with him, that he's only after the females or whatever. There was nothing like that. But this behavior was there. Again, in this case, and again, these were all people who had case 1, 2, 3. None of them had any psychiatric symptoms ever in their lives. There was no psychopathology ever. There was nothing. And in fact, the person who was involved in this excessive kissing-like behavior, he was in fact a professor in a college, and he was a very reputed professor, well known. And this behavior came up. We tried out a lot of medications. I mean, we tried out risperidone, olanzapine, amitriptyline, SSRIs. Nothing worked. The behavior didn't go down. The only way was to keep him away from people. That was the only way that worked. And or someone had to be with him and keep telling him, no, you can't hug, you can't kiss, every time. That was the only way out. And others were warned, he's capable of doing this, so be a little careful when you meet him and whatever. And then of course he deteriorated very fast, so the behavior went off in a few months. So that was the next slide. Yeah. We have another case where we've seen frank hypersexual behavior in old age. Now, when we mean frank hypersexual behavior, this was a 79-year-old man with dementia, and he had a combination of Alzheimer's and vascular dementia, and he began to suddenly show hypersexual behavior. In the night, he would try to go close to his spouse. He would, go after her when she was in the kitchen, and this was very embarrassing for the spouse because he was supposed to be hyposexual in his life. He was never the type who would, they said they never really had like a very active sexual life. It was a moderate sexual life where once a month frequency would happen. It was not like they were the whole time engaged sexually, but this was a behavior that suddenly came up, and it became embarrassing because it would happen in front of his son and daughter-in-law, and they had never seen this happen. And he, it's like the wife was making tea, he would suddenly go and hold her inappropriately. It would become and of course, now what was very striking out here was that the behavior was not seen towards anyone else. It was only seen towards the spouse, but the spouse was a bit distressed with it. And sadly, the spouse was also undergoing treatment for CA cervix at that time. So she was, very distressed with this kind of behavior. And she said, even if he wants to engage in any behavior, I'm not, in a capacity to sort of engage in it. One of the issues that came up here was, she said, am I right to deprive him of this behavior? Sexuality at this age is that probably a reason? And she developed a guilt complex, and we had to sort of counsel her and put her on antidepressants as well, along with, of course, treating him with risperidone, and we had to give him a low dose of aripiprazole. He did very well, and the behavior of course came down. Next. We had another case of somebody who would start watching adult films on television. He was again an 80+ man who suddenly began to sort of see these films on the TV, and he apparently so happened that he saw one of his watchmen seeing some sexual film on the mobile. So then he told the watchman, I also want to see these films, and he gave money to the watchman, and I think the watchman got those films on his phone, and all sorts of things happened. And he was staying alone, so this caregiver of his was also a boy, so he would engage that fellow also in seeing these movies. And it was just primarily viewing adult films and pornographic films. Beyond that, there was nothing else. It became distressing when one of the relatives came over, and the relatives noticed this behavior, and it was brought to our notice. So we didn't know whether we could call it pornographic addiction or just pornography overusage. We really don't know, what term we could use to describe it, but it was seen. They didn't follow up, so we really didn't start any medication because they were not in favor of any medication here. They said, we'll probably keep him in a controlled environment, remove the caregiver. Probably the caregiver is the one who's initiated this was their theory. So they probably we didn't give any treatment here. But it's interesting to know that this kind of a thing can also happen. Next. Yeah, we also had we've all seen this. We've had a case of an older male disrobing, in dementia. So these kind of things happen. He would go to the balcony, disrobe, wave at people. He would also at times urinate from the balcony. And he had frontal lobe dementia, proper frontal lobe dementia, and this kind of behavior, was seen. Here we had to give him, a combination again of low dose risperidone. We also had to give him amitriptyline in a low dose. We couldn't, of course, step up the dose too high, but with this thing, the behavior did go down. Yes, my next case is very important, particularly because it was one of the few cases where the person with dementia tried to sexually assault a maid in their house. So, he tried to sort of attack the maid from behind and tried to coerce her into a sexual act. The maid went and made a police complaint. So, we had to go to, and there was no maid ready to work in their house in Bombay. No maid ready to work in your house is a big problem. So that was more worrisome for the relatives than his assault. But they said so they, the police matter had to be handled. Of course, the police realized he's 83, he's, having dementia, because in the police station itself, his behavior showed that his cognition was totally impaired. And the thing is that itself, but the thing is, sometimes, it can happen that, the whole issue here is, and sadly, the girl who was working was underaged. She was 15 years old. So, the police said we'll register a POXO case, and all sorts of problems came up. Now, in such cases, I mean, it's difficult. I mean, what course the law can take, but it's important to realize even this can happen. And here again, a combination of low dose antipsychotic and tricyclics were what we gave, and it did seem to sort of reduce. No further incidences of assault happened. Next.
Just a second, okay?
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. We've also had cases wherein someone who has been hypersexual throughout his life, the personality got exacerbated further after dementia. So we had a patient who had bipolar disorder, was hypersexual throughout his life, and post 75 developed dementia, and the hypersexuality got exacerbated. The wife remembered that whenever he had this hypersexual behavior during his bipolar phases, they said that they used to give him a combination of lithium, and that subsided. But then his lithium and all had been stopped because his bipolar episodes had reduced. So we actually restarted lithium, considering his age and all other factors, just 450 mg SR per day, and his sexuality reduced, the sexual behavior reduced here. Next slide. Next case. Yeah. So we have also seen a case of a 73-year-old male with early onset dementia that started at around 60 plus, with compulsive masturbatory behavior in old age. Now, when I looked up literature here, there has been SSRIs that have been used, mirtazapine has been used. He also had a sleep issue. So we decided to give him mirtazapine 7.5 to, we stepped it up to 15 mg, and the compulsive self-stimulatory behavior reduced. This would happen multiple times a day, around 8-9 times a day, though let me tell you, because of his age and probably other factors, there was never really an ejaculation that happened every time. But the fact was, this behavior would happen. It would happen when he was alone. It would happen when he was with people. So it became a lot embarrassing at times for the relatives. So they brought, these were all the main complaints they came with. The dementia was not a worry for them. It was the sexual issues that were a worry. Next. We've also had this, I've already spoken about, but we had cases of sudden outbursts of sexual behavior, meaning one fine day they'll suddenly be sexual for 8 hours, 9 hours, and then there's no sign of that behavior for months, and again there's an outburst. So this kind of a thing also happens in these kind of cases. Next slide. So one of the things which is very important, before we go ahead, we've also reported one case of a patient that who went in to see a doctor. He had dementia. He went in to see a doctor who gave him an enema, and he sort of started asking for the enema daily. Now we don't know, and they said that he's probably getting some kind of sexual pleasure from the enema. Now we don't know whether it was something which was related to his homosexual tendencies, because nothing was known. We don't know whether, so we've reported that as a clismaphilia, that is people who get sexual pleasure out of enemas, clismaphilia like behavior in old age. It's been reported as a case by me. So the main thing is sexuality in dementia related to the premorbid personality? We don't really know. Sometimes the premorbid may be hyposexual. You can get someone who's hypersexual, or an exacerbation of what is there. Next slide. So the medical management, as I said, there is no real sound management. You can use antipsychotics, you can use tricyclics, you can use SSRIs. You try what is best. You can use a mood stabilizer. Try what is best and see what works best. Next. The psychosocial management is important. The family has to be briefed. The caregivers have to be briefed. They have to be told it's a brain-based phenomenon. Next. And basically, we explain brain-wise, on an MRI to them that, this is the reason why this behavior is happening. And when you explain to them that, they probably realize it's not, because a common misperception is it's happening on purpose. It's not probably happening, because of dementia. Next. So it's also important that rehabilitation homes have to be aware, because we're seeing this behavior happen more and more in old age homes also. So caregivers who are looking after these patients in old age homes need to be aware of this kind of behavior. The issue is whether if someone engages in sexual behavior which is not detrimental to people around him, should he be given that sexual freedom or not? That's the ethical concern, that is often a worry. Next. So you need to ask for these sexual symptoms in history because they're never really told to you unless they come as, with the presenting thing. Next. And you need to keep the relatives vigilant. They need to be totally aware and be with the patient at all times. Sometimes mischievous caregivers can probably also lead to sexual behavior in dementia patients. So we need to be a little vigilant. It could be a form of elder abuse. So we need to be vigilant there also. Next. Yes, so sexual behavior is common in dementia. And yeah, that's about it. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Avinash, for again that wonderful presentation. Mohandas sir, are you still around? If we can have your video on, so there are a few questions.
I am there.
Yeah. Thank you so much for
I just heard completely what about Avinash. All the cases also I can tell also.
No doubt about that. Sir. Okay, so we will just go to certain questions which are there in the chat box. One is towards you. Which are the 3 most promising drugs you will recommend, its doses and side effects during 2021-22? So probably whatever which is available right now, nothing which is there in the pipeline, because they are asking for doses and also the side effects.
Answer is very simple. After 2020 or even 21, we do have only donepezil or donepezil memantine. Usually I give donepezil, then I usually give a donepezil memantine combination. But the success rate is even 33% may have some improvement. They may have some benefit, especially the behavioral manifestations. That is the article that I have written along with Jeffrey Cummings, which was published, I think 5 years back or something. Apart from that, we are not seeing any new drugs except for neuropsychiatric symptoms of dementia. People are still searching with the multiple targets. We do not have anything specific now at hand. But adenocarmab, that immunization, which I have told, people are talking in the EIPS group. I think nobody in India, very few people in India can afford. Even the company says that $56,000 to $58,000 in a year. And I don't know whether anybody in India, Bombay, Avinash can afford and Jai Shastri can afford, not Mohandas. I will not write costly medicines. Fine. Secondly, it is an act, it is that approval of these drugs. Usually you have to see that there are so many pharma politics, okay? And this was initially, it was rejected. Secondly, higher dosage they tried, and they have told that nothing else is there, so you can try. But will we try? I don't think anybody in the early stages of pre-Alzheimer's will come to you with the MCI. They will come to the psychiatrist to moderate or even moderate to severe cases. And will we try? I doubt it. Okay. So regarding immunotherapy, some of the trials, especially Solnasab, and my friend has done, that is many of you might be knowing, Grossman. He had been to India also. He was also involved in trials, but all immunization therapies were failures. Only except this thing, but the people write in EIPS so much about it. But the fact I have told you, it has to be IV infusion, and you have to stepwise, we have to do it, and the cost factor really limits it. And you have to have even amyloid scan. Only very few people are doing in good research centers. Some of our Indians are also involved in amyloid PET in Australia and I think my own students are there. but it is too early. We do not do all these things here as a routine, as a research paradigm. We can do it. Otherwise, how can you detect it? So I doubt it. So we have to stay with the donepezil, memantine, or the combination, and your desperate remedies, because you add everything, whether omega-3 fatty acids or vitamin D or it's just like COVID, you know, you give all vitamin C, vitamin D, everything. What nonsense is there? Zinc, which is immunomodulator. These are all evidence is very thin. The evidence is very, very thin. Similarly, the fate is also like this. Okay, so we have to still wait.
Sir, yeah. I have a connected question. You have any preference among all the anticholinesterase inhibitors that we have? Do you have any preference with regards to
I don't give
formulation?
rivastigmine. I don't like rivastigmine.
And
I don't like galantamine, though it has got an indirect effect initially. Right. That is why even in India, galantamine, very few people are prescribing because the dosing range is little bit high. It has got a nicotinamide mechanism also. People tried of that, but now it has gone, I think, bad. And the literature is only on donepezil. And that also with some pressure, they have told about the higher dosage, 23 milligram. Many people may not tolerate it. Then the question is, how long you have to give it? This is the question. Yes. How long you will give it? Suppose you are not expecting an improvement within 6 months to 1 year in behavioral manifestations. Cognition, forget it, only 1/3 you can get it improvement. Right. Because the disease is progressing. Right. It is almost like a fast passenger bus and a passenger train. So you can make the first passenger maybe a passenger rather than you are not going to treat anything. So we have basically non-pharmacological techniques have to be adopted at the earliest, including exercise, etc., and a healthy lifestyle. And we know that the diet very good. That is a lifestyle. Okay. Lifestyle.
Do you have any preference for the formulation in terms of donepezil? We do have oral patches, we do have Medicaid drugs, and also the syrup. Do you have any particular preference in the?
I only give oral. I only give oral tablets. Okay. And my patients take it. I don't want to experiment with anything, and depending upon the tolerability, otherwise they are of no use. Even if you are giving, it may be of no use.
Okay.
We wait and nothing. I don't like even citicoline only for vascular dementia, but some people say that only in Germany citicoline is approved, but here no. Okay. Nootropics, sorry, no. Right. Lipoic acid, alpha lipoic acid, and other thing, people, many pharma people will come and tell no. But N-acetylcysteine, I am a fan of it. N-acetylcysteine. N-acetylcysteine, 600 milligram, twice a day, I usually give in addition to this thing in some patients with a reasonably, even substance use disorders, you can give it. Your area, autistic spectrum disorders, you can give it. And it is supposed to improve cognition, but RCTs are not much. But there are studies or not the RCTs, we have to have large data, but symptomatically we get some improvement with N-acetylcysteine. 600 milligram twice daily add-on. And you may try because we don't have it. We don't have any other drugs to do it.
Okay.
It is not recommended in any practice guidelines.
Okay, Avinash, there is a question for you, which goes that could it be that the patient might have an intact memory about sexual relationships in their past, and hence that comes forward during dementia, or it has nothing to do with the past sexual attractions or the relationships?
See, we really don't know. Sometimes, I mean, there are remote memories which are there, you know, which can come to the fore. I mean, it's there, but we don't have any test or method to sort of prove it, you know, unless, I mean, I don't know if fMRIs can help us, but really we don't know. Secondly, also sometimes what can happen is probably there is a reversal of the premorbid personality. It does happen in dementia. Or there sometimes are people who may have been hypersexual, but it's hidden from the family. We don't know, and you know that comes to the fore post dementia. So either one of these.
Can I add,
Yes.
Avinash?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
May I
Please,
add?
please, please, please,
May I add?
please,
Because
please, sir.
I have spoken on this topic, basically. Now, the problem is there are no available drugs, as you have rightly told. Basically, non-pharmacological management is essential. Except in FTDs, frontotemporal dementias, sometimes SSRIs can help. You have already told the case of SSRI or mirtazapine. Mirtazapine may not improve hypersexuality or something because the mechanism is different. And SSRI, yes. The question is, some people try anticonvulsants because in severe cases, if there is a disinhibition, can we try anticonvulsants? Aggression, sexual aggression, nothing. But we do not have evidence. Can we estrogenize them rather than androgenize them? That is another question people say. But at that stage, you have to see the PSA, etc., etc. And do we want to venture onto this thing? Are we doing ethical thing? We have to discuss, as you have rightly told, we have to discuss with the relatives, explain things, brain-based psychoeducation. That is the thing. And it is a difficult area to manage. Very, very difficult. I had also a patient, not many patients. Out of this, the female with a frontotemporal dementia, she has got wanted to increase sexual exploits, pulling out the husband, and even the daytime she does the acts, not with the thing, and they're all embarrassed. That elderly person even molesting, so-called molesting the daughter-in-law. Even irrespective, he was a gentleman to the core. But then they thought that what is happening? Then investigated that was a clear cut of dementia. This can happen. So what we do it, there is nothing else. We can try, as you have rightly told, SSRIs we can give it, or sometimes as a desperate remedy, we sometimes give a lot of anticonvulsants to reduce aggression. But mainly non-pharmacological methods are the stay, but still it is very difficult.
Okay. So one wonderful comment, sir. I think we'll take this as final query, and I'll ask both of you to please give your comments on that. If a patient comes with a mild cognitive impairment or early cognitive changes, we have still not diagnosed it as dementia, would you still want to start any of the possible pharmacotherapeutic intervention just to make sure that the progression to Alzheimer's disease does not happen? So MCI very, very early, but they have a lot of awareness. Maybe there is a family history. But what is your clinical take on that?
You want me to answer that?
Yes. Sir,
yeah,
yes,
yeah.
sir.
So
Now,
please go ahead. Please go.
Yeah.
You know, the conversion rate of MCI to clear dementia is getting high. Depends upon how you assess it. Do we assess it? Assess this thing. Yesterday, I had a talk and we had a discussion on MoCA battery. And MoCA battery, we can sometimes do it. Do we do these batteries? MoCA or even that Addenbrooke's, even abridged one. Do we do it? I used to do it earlier, even the translated Malayalam version. initially 100-point scale, but which is because it was done by Madhuranath and others. He was a friend of mine. So we translated and we used to do it. So that is initially thought that Adam Brooks was to differentiate frontotemporal and Alzheimer's, but still hybrid scales are there. I will not discuss much on it, but how will you diagnose it? So periodic evaluation is needed, and then we can know there is a possibility of conversion. Then you have to start on the earliest one, that is you can try on donepezil conversion, MCI. That is those who are going to be converters. Otherwise, you are nutrients, other, you have got armamentarium of so many junk drugs, so-called junk drugs in the market, provided they can afford, or you can please your pharma companies, up to you. but those people, you have to do exercise, non-pharmacological regime, religiosity, and explain it to the so-called caregivers or later caretakers. Caregiver is different from caretaker. Explain the evolution of the illness and what to look for and how to do it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Ravi, you want to say something? Or
No. I think I agree with what Sir says. I mean, there's nothing to add over there. Yeah.
I agree. I completely agree. So I think that was a wonderful presentation. Both the speakers did an extremely good job, and we had also good discussion. And I thank the BPS team and family for giving me this opportunity for sharing and moderating. I hand over to Priyanka again for final comments.
Priyanka, before you say the final thank you, I will only just say that we're also very thankful to the Alzheimer's Related Disorders Society of India, the Mumbai chapter, because they've been an academic partner with us in this event. And September is Dementia Awareness Month. And the theme is No Alzheimer's, KNOW, no Alzheimer's and no dementia. So we're spreading awareness, I mean, on medical platforms, non-medical platforms with them. So we, of course, they also run a daycare center in Bombay, which is now not running because of COVID, but it's called Smriti Vishwam. It's a daycare center primarily for dementia patients. So they are our partners for today's event. Due to lack of time, we won't be giving them a chance to speak today, but maybe on another program, yes, definitely they'll be there. We are having another panel on dementia on the 22nd, which is there, which is a non-psychiatrist panel. We're going to have a totally non-psychiatrist panel where we look at multiple facets of dementia. So that's where I think they will also come in. Yeah, yes, sir.
Moderator, can I just make one statement?
Yes,
please.
ADRC initially was started by Jacob Roy.
Yes.
And Jacob Roy had been to me when we were doing a CME program.
Yes.
He discussed with me, and he used to come to my home, and then only there was a genesis of
this.
This
yeah.
That is a history. He's no more now because his father had a dementia. And I know the complete history, but later then I came out from that because of my preoccupation with so many things. So that is a history, long back. Thank you.
Right, sir. Thank you. Yes, over to you, Priyanka. Yeah. Today we have kept you a little beyond your housing duty, so we will relieve you fast.
It's completely fine.
Yeah.
So thank you everyone for being there for this amazing session. We got to hear good about our psychopharmacology and the recent advances in dementia, and definitely the interesting cases which were, I mean, we would have not seen all of them, but yes, we got to learn a lot from Avinash sir that, tomorrow if we see something like this, we'll be able to manage based on what he's taught us. So I'd like to thank everyone. I'd like to thank especially Jai Shastri sir for moderating the session, making my job really easy. And thank you all. Have a lovely evening. I just want to convey that the next program is on 18th of September, which is Suicide in the Online Era. It's on Saturday. Please be there. It's going to be an interesting one because with the upcoming, with the ongoing online, schooling and everything with teenagers, I think it would be a good discussion. So requesting you all to be there. Thank you. Have a good night. Have a lovely week.
Yeah.
Okay, good
Thank
night.
you.
Good night.
Thank you,
all.
sir. Bye.